Your career has been very impressive.
I think after my 7 amazing years with Deutsche, I literally waking up in a hotel room, didn't know where I was. But the scary thing is waking up somewhere, not knowing where you are, was, I think, a good sort of call to say,
To work inside of some of the companies in specifically this industry and to maintain the heart you have and to have a desire to improve the world, I think is not something you find in a lot of folks that are in this industry and that work in, candidly, the biggest banks.
I've been in a bit of fintech hibernation and I'm coming out of it now.
I love that term. Namita, welcome to Everything is Fintech. On that note,
Thank you.
everything literally is fintech, including back problems.
That's right.
That's the
They
takeaway
start
here.
from there.
Exactly.
The back problems start from the fintech work that you
Exactly.
do, yes.
So let's start. This show is expansive, as I told you. We cover all kinds of different things. You and I and Scarlett had the chance to meet last
That's
time we were
right.
here.
That's right.
And I just kind of sat there in awe in the things that
You're
you've
very
accomplished and done. It's true. I mean, your career has been very impressive. And
Thank you.
to work inside of some of the companies in specifically this industry and to maintain the heart you have and to have a desire to improve the world, I think is not something you find in a lot of folks that are in this industry and that work in, candidly, the biggest banks. So
That's right, yeah.
I think it's
Thank you.
commendable and it's good to have you here. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited. It's been a while, so yeah. Scarlett and I had connected so long ago when I was in New York, so it was really nice to reconnect.
Yeah.
And sort of, I've been in a bit of fintech hibernation and I'm coming out of it now.
I love that term.
yeah.
We should coin that term. I think after every Money 2020, I have about a 2-week
Yes.
fintech hibernation.
Oh.
I can't open the news.
Nope.
No, just got to stay away
Yeah,
from
but
it.
I think just detox. I feel like I love having good, solid breaks, which I've done. We talked about some of my breaks before. I feel it's very important for your soul. It's also important to look at things slightly differently with a fresh pair of eyes. I feel like technology detox is another huge thing I think we need to manage a lot. And, I think one of the luxuries of also being an entrepreneur, which I have been for the last 6 years, has been that. It's been, I can say, okay, I'm, not taking any meetings today. I'm going to take the dogs to the beach, things like that, which not that you can't do it when you're in a corporate world, but I think
It's a little harder.
I think, but I feel like, everyone needs to take advantage of your circumstance. And hibernation is key for the soul.
Yes. It's fascinating to be in Singapore, especially coming from Bangkok last week to here. And I find it, like, obviously spend a decent amount of time in New York because that's where the Money 2020 headquarters is. And I kind of equate Singapore and New York in some ways. But when I come here, and again, we were just having a conversation about like health and happiness while we were eating lunch. These are not things you discuss in New York financial sectors, right? Like the idea of, I need to take some time and make sure I'm actually happy as a person. You kind of forget that. And then I come here and I sit with the team and I get time with you and, people like Pauline and Rachel. And I remember that life actually matters. And it's interesting that the ethos is different, but the speed seems similar in some kind of way.
Yeah, but I also feel like you have to really tune into yourself. And I think after my 7 amazing years with Deutsche, I literally waking up in a hotel room, didn't know where I was. Was not a, it's up in the air situation. You're in a new country every week, every fortnight. You're in another plane, another hotel. It's all the same.
Yeah.
But the scary thing is waking up somewhere, not knowing where you are, was I think a good sort of call to say, maybe let's try and sort of just pause for a minute and try and see what you can do and what you don't want to do, and just sort of take that break. And that's when I took my first break, a long break, 1.5 years, and I spent 6 months running a boutique hotel in Zanzibar.
Oh, you told me that quickly when we had coffee last time.
That's right.
I love that.
That was probably the most soulful thing I landed up doing, but it also is about reconnecting with the life in general. And to be honest, I think fintech has been so instrumental in Africa because of the lack of infrastructure. I mean, this is 10 years, 14 years ago, where people were just even moving money through SMSs then, because you don't have the infrastructure. I need to give you money, I can do it.
Right.
So, it doesn't leave you, fintech doesn't leave you, because it's now solving everyday problems. But I think just being in Africa, it was Gods Must Be Crazy, all episodes every day, and a different hustle, and you're dealing with crazy customers, but but have a great backdrop. You're on the Indian Ocean, and you see the moon rising from the ocean. But I think it was very soulful, and it then makes you stop and then say, okay, why am I doing all of this, right? Yeah. And I think even your mental health is a big. You keep running, and the pace of change is so fast that you worry that if you get off the bus, you won't be able to get back into it. And also, I think an identity thing. I think people struggle with who they are because you've been associated with the brand that you work for, but you don't know who you are as a human being, which I think is of paramount importance, because you get off that bus again, and then, okay, what happens then? So I see that a lot with all the coaching and the mentoring I do. I've advised 30 odd fintechs. I mentor people. And one of the main things I always say to everybody, please always be connected to yourself, your values, your authentic self. It's a lot of work.
Well, taking the time to figure out what those values are, and they're constantly shifting, but you gotta, go back to them, but you feel different because you've grown as a person, and then there's the levels to that.
Yes.
When you're also trying to work 50, 60 hours a week it's just about impossible.
But I think it also then sort of gives you clarity on what is important to you, right? You can work smart, you can prioritize, and I think you get so caught up that you don't think about these things, and I think that's why burnout is high. People don't want to do what they do because they're not having a good time, and they're not working with toxicity, or not working with the good people. So I almost feel like within the entrepreneurial journey, you have to manage that balance, and you have to. I mean it in the greatest compliment way, that entrepreneurs are psychopaths.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And you have to have that laser focus. I mean it in the best way.
The successful ones, at least.
Yeah, and you need the laser focus, but you also need that balance at some point, or just be aware of who you are as a human being. And I think that balance, I don't find it very often with people. And you're chasing whatever you're chasing.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of it, you want to be happy, and you want to also have hobbies.
That's a crazy thought.
Which I think people will be like, oh my God, what is she talking about? But I think it's important, because that's how you find your balance, and then you focus on what you do well. So for me, I think sort of working with the top 3 banks, sort of starting, actually, if I backtrack, originally from India. Dad was in the Air Force, so I moved a lot as a kid. I went to 8 different schools.
All inside of India? Or
all
were you
inside of India. But India is like Europe, right?
Yeah.
You have so many different states, so many languages, all of that. But I feel like that blueprint for what I want to do was almost set out there. I love greenfield. I love everything that is gray. I love to build. And that came from the ability to adapt, because you had to, right? Every 3 years, you're in a new school, you're in a new city, new people. And I think that knowing that you're aware of that has been probably one of my biggest assets, that I understand that. And you also have an ability to work with people. At the end of it, technology, but you still need people.
Yeah.
And I think that combination of being ability to have that balance and that interoperability, which is what we love to say within the fintech world, is what is needed in various things we landed up doing. So I landed up being part of the team to set up AT&T in India, which was exciting. It changed the world. We were 17, 18 on interns. We were in a shop house below a building with 3 very senior executives from AT&T Wireless.
And you were one of the interns?
I was one of them.
Okay.
And it was...
This I didn't get to hear last time, so I'm on the edge of my seat. Yeah.
Oh my God, that was just probably the most cutting edge thing, but it's also about building solutions for what clients need. For me, that's a key thing. I think sales came very naturally, which meant client first was always an interesting approach to things. And when you are part of a build, it's all hands to deck. So I think it really started from there, and it seems like it's a bit accidental, but it almost is deliberate. Those choices come to you because of what you attract, what you give out.
It all makes sense in retrospect.
That's right.
Yeah.
But also accepting that this is what I like to do. I think that was another thing very earlier on for me. I came to Singapore and I set up a software services company selling PeopleSoft back in the day. And I sold to financial services. I covered all of Asia Pacific, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, all of it. And Deutsche was a client, didn't win the business, landed up joining them, and then landed up going to help them set up 4 retail businesses across the world.
And so began the planes and the hotels.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think what was so exciting about that was, solving complex problems was something that naturally attracted me to things.
Sure.
It's a joke in the family where, they're like, you need to be part of some crisis management because that's what you're fantastic. Some people have it, some people don't.
Yep.
I am very calm. I'm able to figure out what needs to happen. And, I love it. And to me, setting up new businesses is a little bit of that, right? Because your ability to adapt, you're in China, don't speak the language, you're trying to build a business based on the license of an investment bank. This is pre-Olympics. It was not what the China it was today. Rules were changing. We had a product, we had to change it. We had a core, it was just interesting. But the fact that you could just put your hand up and say, listen, I don't understand these structured products. Can you help me? Was my masterclass on steroids, what banking is.
The willingness to be inside of a chartered financial institution and be in a boardroom or a meeting or whatever it is and actually have the willingness to ask what you might perceive as a dumb question, I find to be the only reason I know anything. Maybe that's too much, but most of my banking knowledge came from working inside of a community bank in Kansas City and just saying, wait, what?
Yes.
Every day, over and over again.
And maybe because you also have a lens of an outsider and you're not jaded, you can also have simple questions. You know, for me, it is not complicated. My favorite thing is common sense is uncommon. And if you approach things from that, I feel like you come to better solutions, which may not be the most popular thing because banking is also known for its bureaucracy and
we like to complicate things for different reasons at different times.
Yes, in whatever way. But when you have a chance to set up something new, you're also using the backdrop of old, but also bringing the new. That always is an interesting setup because people have known to do things a certain way, and then you ask the question to say, but can we not do it the other way? We have another tech and all of that. So anyway, that sort of drove a lot of my. I was really very, very thankful for the leadership who spotted, because I feel that some of these things also are luck, timing, and somebody seeing that in you is also very crucial. I probably never applied for roles with a JD. It's something, things evolve you through conversations, and I because of the expansive background, it's hard to narrow it down to say I can do this, but I can do this and this and this, and where do I go in and out? So I feel like that was a big part of everything I've landed up doing. And now the entrepreneur in residence is very sexy. We didn't have a word for it, but I was already doing it.
It sounds like it's been your whole career.
It has been, and but your ability to then very quickly, and also I think the main thing is you inherit teams. You don't have the possibility to build up relationships and bonds. You get a whole bunch of people and you're like, okay, what do we do very quickly?
Sounds a little bit like changing schools every 3 years.
That's
and having a whole new group of people that you need to just, the chameleon nature of you, I think, from that explains a lot, right? Like you can walk in any room and find you can shift.
You can shift, but also
but maintain yourself.
But also because at a human level,
right.
you are able to connect with people, right? Because you're interested in the humans,
right?
And you know what is also so beautiful, that we as human beings have much more in common than we have differences. You know, I was talking to my colleagues who came from Germany back then, where we were like, you know, we sold milk bottles and newspapers and made our pocket money. And she was like, oh my God, we did exactly the same. Who would have thought? Right? So something at a very human level, food connects you, having a great time connects you with people. And if you're able to bring all of that in your work environment, you will win. Right? And it's also the process, right? Because there's so many things changes and you are accountable for X and Y,
right.
but you also have to constantly recalibrate that every stakeholder is with you. And again, that goes back to having done sales, because you're also giving people the respect. I feel that is the most important thing when you work with different people. Every person's role is crucial. So they bring something to the table, but as running a program, it's your role to make sure that the vision and everyone's excited about doing what they do. And I think that was something which was the most magical thing, to be able to, and then also call on people to say, hey, I'm doing this and I don't know. Do you mind stepping?
The willingness to say that.
Yes.
Additionally.
It's impossible, right? You just don't know what you don't know. And I felt like that was a key thing, where egos have to be left outside the room to say, don't understand it, you have to help me, can I? So when we built the India business, I then had the team from the India business help me with a lot of elements for China, because we called it bank out of the box. We had a playbook. We were plugging into every market. You knew exactly what you were building. You had a 70-30 rule, because the regulatory overtures are about what products you can do in certain markets, but we wanted to try and standardize, which meant that we went through that in India. We could then take it to Turkey and then to Russia, everywhere else as well. So it was just interesting also to give that to the teams, to say you also get to be part of that win, right? But you know, I think Deutsche probably was one of the best banks. The opportunities were immense. The way they managed their people was amazing. I still have very fond memories. I also think I became that professional because of that.
Yeah.
So I think it was, the opportunities and all of those things that sort of makes you who you are. And then, taking that break, coming back, doing a small stint with UBS in terms of doing strategy work with them, and then going to Xerox to run their financial services business.
I was fascinated by that piece. I want to ask you one more thing about the Deutsche thing, because I think one thing that I don't want to say on camera that I'm at that point of like just always, on a plane and in a hotel. But like I've had a moment where I've woken up and thought I was in a different country, and I wasn't, and I was like, oh yeah, that's where I am today.
It is not fun.
It's an interesting thing, and I wonder from you said it was 7 years that you were at Deutsche? Did you find through that time that you were able to, or was there a shift in your ability to appreciate the moment? Like at the beginning, was that easier, and at the end, did you take some of it for granted? Or I'm curious about your mindset through that.
I think because I am such a positive and I keep going and I'm excited about opportunities, I forgot about myself. And I think that probably was the defining moment where I was like, and I was very, very lucky that I had friends everywhere.
Yeah.
Right? So it was easy to travel, whether I was in London, I was in Frankfurt, whether I was in Moscow, I was in Singapore, wherever. I had friends, so the weekends made it enjoyable, and you knew that you could do this because you had that downtime. But you also forget that it takes a toll on your body, your mind, your soul. You are missing out on a lot of things because the eyes is on the prize. The CEO has announced that the bank will be up in 8 months, which means you're like, oh my God.
Got some things to do.
Yeah, and then you work backwards. And I think it all adds up. So I feel for you if that's something which is, it's not a comfortable
I'm doing
thing.
okay. Don't worry. I'm still having a lot of fun.
But I think it's important. And then I also realized having a good therapist becomes a very big part of part of that, because not everybody understands transiency. In the middle of all that, I was leaving Singapore to move to Mumbai, but I moved to Beijing. My things were in storage in Singapore. I was living out of a hotel room in Mumbai.
So you felt very balanced.
Yeah, but it was super comfortable, where I didn't want anybody to do anything for me, right? I wanted to wash my own clothes, and people are like, she's crazy. Why does she want it? But that was my semblance of normality, having a bit of normalcy.
Holding on to something.
Like, weird, right? So I landed up then having a service department in Beijing, and that felt good because I could just make myself an omelette, Things like that, which sounds so absurd in the bigger scheme of things, but when you live in hotels, you're like, I don't want anybody to do anything for me.
It's the little things.
It's the little things that matter. And I think that's something, if I have to do it again, I will be very conscientious about those choices. And again, the corporates have their own agenda. They're running through what they need to do. You have to make sure that you have boundaries.
Yeah.
Right? And I think I never hear people talk about this. It's never spoken. People are shying away from that. It's the wins, but it's also a lot of hardship. It's hard to be an entrepreneur as well. So I think there's a lot of things that happen that are not talked about.
We don't talk about mental health much as an industry.
We
I mean, I think maybe like the Silicon Valley, like true SF, and that side of the world, there's more conversation because you've had founders commit suicide and things along those lines. And also, I mean, investment bankers working themselves so hard that they just fall over debt. I mean, it's
not an easy thing. And I think COVID made sort of remote work so amazing. Yeah. But I think sort of if I jump back into my current situation, most of my clients are everywhere.
Right.
I work remotely, thank God for my dogs. Otherwise I would have, and they participate very actively in my meetings. Yeah. Absolutely. So I think that's another thing that, when you are a social person and then you are landing up working remotely, it's hard. It's not easy because you've got clients at different time zones and you're getting through what you want to do. So I do feel like there are tranches of it, and we as social people need that. And a lot of that balance comes from that, which I don't think people are talking about. So going back to Xerox, it was super interesting because what I also didn't know about Xerox is that they are probably one of the OGs of innovation.
More than probably.
No, they are.
Xerox Park is absolute legend.
It's amazing.
I drove by it once, and my girlfriend at the time was like, "Why are you so entranced by that office park?" And I was like, "That's where most of that's Mecca, And
that's
she just didn't get it. But it's like Xerox Park is
things
legend.
For me, I always say innovation is an overly abused word, but applied innovation is I love, and Xerox was a great example of that. The photocopier is legendary. Like, it's funny in India, people say, "Can I get a Xerox?" They won't say photocopy.
So it's like Kleenex.
Oh, absolutely, right. You're like, what? And when you think about it, you're like, oh my God, this was coined 100
I think that's true in the US too. Like
everybody says Xerox.
I don't know about everybody, but I would say more than 50%. Yeah.
Or people who are slightly older say that in that generation. Younger people, I don't think you don't understand.
Well, they're just like, you want me? Why do you want paper?
Exactly. Different. But I think what was interesting is that they are so digitally driven, and that was the interesting part for me. Was I was helping them manage one of their largest Canadian insurance firms.
Where were you living?
I was in Singapore. I'd come back to Singapore. By then, I think, doing the whirlwind of things, I was back here. Okay. And the thing that was interesting is that they realized that their conversations were happening only at a photocopier level, but they were so much more because they were digitizing the entire onboarding process and what can they do differently with the distribution of agents selling what they're doing. And there was so much intelligence in the photocopying machine that this could embed all of that digitization. The forms go in. You actually take away a lot of the steps and then move to a digital policy, which is what they wanted to. And they didn't understand how much technology was there. And these are big ticket products and projects and contracts. Non-sexy, but interesting, that needed to be done. So I did that for a couple of years. Very interesting. We did a whole transformation across 7 countries. We did a lot of digital work, but I got a bit bored.
Let me ask you one question though,
Sure.
because I told you that I might reference my phone at some points here. And it is specifically to pull up your LinkedIn I want to find the exact title that you had at Xerox because I want you to explain it to me a little bit more. Hold on, I got to click into experience. Okay, so Fuji Xerox Global Services, Regional Principal, Financial Services Industry. So I can see some ways that Xerox functions in the financial services industry. Tell me more about just what that means. Like, this is a dumb question, but help me unpack how those two things fit together. You alluded to some data pieces, unpack that a bit more.
So they have a bunch of businesses. One is really the global services business, which is really supporting large corporates. Banks obviously are a big part of it with all the KYC. There's a lot of paper that gets pushed in. Now, of course, things are different. That business was supporting a lot of their global bank clients. So I came in from that perspective because one of the things, their challenge was they didn't have enough people who were able to speak the language. And like I said, they were sort of relegated into just procurement and just buying machines and that deal. But they wanted to shift the conversation and work with the CEO or the CEO to say, okay, what is your mandate? We can help you with this digital transformation by doing this.
And I would imagine the regulatory compliance aspect, that's what the conversations you were having, I'm sure, are very different than going into it, like a consumer packaged good.
Correct, because you're also not, and I think that for me has always been a main theme, that you're also focusing on what the problems the client is trying to solve. Technology has to be an enabler. You can't lead with technology, and I think that's where it all sort of crumples, where you're not doing that. So the focus was, okay, what is your plan, Mr. CEO, Miss CEO, whoever that person is? What are you trying to achieve? What do you want to do in the next 3 years? This is how we can then help you, and this is how it will look, and this is how you go about it. It's a very different conversation, right? Because he or she is also not thinking about that they could do all of it. And digitization is on top of everybody's mind. So it was very interesting to be able to collaborate and then go in every country with them and pitch and saying, this is what we'll do, this is how you need to. And change is not an easy thing, right? Because people who operationally run things in any business are so married to it that they're
especially
like,
in a larger, established, regulated financial institution.
And also throwing legal and compliance at you to say, no, but can I see that regulation? Or I don't know where it is. Things like that. So I think there's a lot of that. It finally goes back to making people comfortable and making sure you're compliant, because that whole thing where regulation, you cannot ask questions, or you can't challenge, or you can't look at it in a different way, because there's a lot of interpretation.
A lot.
But I think it's changing. I do feel that there is because again, I go back to the fact that people have to be brought in to the conversation. You need to bring them along the journey for them to understand. Regulation is there to make sure that you are doing the right thing. And it is always something that is up for interpretation, right? As long as you are making sure that the customers are not exposed, that there is a plan B if plan A doesn't work, that you've thought through that. It's really all about that. The risk and compliance part of what you can do and you can't do is pretty defined. So having that dialogue and having your legal compliance risk people with you on that journey is probably one of the big success reasons where firms get successful. If you keep them at hand and you just get them involved toward the end, of course it's not going to work.
The FPB is kind of losing all of its teeth, and it's things are shifting in an interesting way as far as that goes.
At a very different pace. So I think that the world is moving.
We're moving on. So you got a little bored at Xerox, is what you said at the or maybe not bored, but
I mean, I think I'm so used to solving complex problems. It was a little non-sexy. It was a nice break to have from that, and then I had some personal things that I needed to attend. My dad fell really sick, so I went back to India for about 3-4 months. And I was finishing up rolling off this piece of work, stepped off, needed to go home and attend to the parents. He's absolutely fine, 87 and rocking.
Good, okay. I love it.
And he came, and I was away for about 4 or 5 months, and I came back. sort of thinking about what next. And one of the things we landed up doing then was setting up female leaders in fintech called Femtech, and everybody thought we were women hygiene product, but we were not.
And then we did some education.
Yes, this was with Gela. We set up the chapter here, and I got involved with MAS back in the day with SFF, and there was a lot of interesting things because I've always been part of being a champion for giving people a voice. Even my time at Deutsche, and everything that else I've landed up doing. So that was super exciting to be part of that, and I also there was a funny little thing which we didn't talk about. I landed up driving Uber for 6 weeks because.
What?
Yes.
Not out of necessity, I imagine.
I think they were just setting up here. I was always very curious, and it was part of my, checklist of driving a taxi.
That was on your checklist?
Yeah, I love to drive, and I have probably met the most phenomenal taxi drivers around the world, and you learn so much, and people have just been amazing. I had a driver in Frankfurt for many, many years, and you just build relationships in London and in China, and but they had the heart and the soul for you, right? I just found it really fascinating why people did what they did, and I was like, you know what? I'm between gigs. Why not?
Why not?
And I did it. Oh my God, it was the craziest thing. But it was also wild because it also is very humbling, right? Because you're with the actual taxi drivers, and they were all looking at me to say, who is this woman? Like, what's wrong with her? Now it's very normal. A lot of people do it between going to drop off their kids. And
sure.
I feel like that probably and Airbnb are probably one of the most amazing shapeshifters, right? It gave people a lot of different access. It was so hard, but I met some incredible people. My neighbors were all at my house with coffee waiting to say, okay, start your app and then drop us. And it was...
That's you were running your own little business inside of the business.
It was hilarious. I mean, but it was also like, you're like, oh my God, now I know why the taxi drivers are so grumpy. And the algorithm was not stabilized. And, I remember doing 4 rides to the airport, and I was like, oh my God, I need to stop. Right? I need a bio break, people. And if you stop, you're off the, you don't get any of your incentives. And, it was insane.
I never thought about that.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And it was really not designed for drivers. And I gave them a big feedback around, what can be done differently, and, just met incredible people. And it was really, and actually, funnily enough, my interview at Stanchart, I went in my own Uber.
Were there any crazy, doing it for that amount of time, any crazy stories, No,
I met some... this is Singapore, right? So crazy is sort of...
Yeah, it's boxed in a different way. You're not an Uber driver in Vegas.
I feel like, and I'm social and I love to chat, so it was really interesting. And they all had a zigzag on their face to say, like, really, lady? Like, what is the deal? Because there were not that many people doing it at that time. I met this gentleman who's run the vertical farming that was very new then. And I was like, dude, I need to use your bathroom, right? We've come a long way. I'm going to switch off. Do you mind? And, it was just like, but again, I think it goes back to being comfortable and saying, listen, I need I just need a bio break.
Yeah.
But I think the more, you also lean back on the fact that you can read people. Some people get in grumpy and you're like, okay, I don't want to talk to you.
Yeah.
Like,
just
whatever.
look forward.
I'm like, whatever's you. But it's so interesting because your ability to read the room comes into play. The energy of people is so important. For me, that's always been a very important thing. So, some of those things automatically you gain more experience. I think every interaction, there is something to take. And I remember going for my role at Stanchart to lead financial crime compliance, innovation, and oxymoron, I went in my own Uber.
That's wild.
It was like, that would be bizarre that I finish my interview and switch on my app, and the gentleman who interviewed me would have been it would have driven him insane.
You're probably the only one that can say that sentence, I would imagine. Went for a C-suite level job, and I had...
In my own Uber, I switched it off. I parked, and it was so... But that's the thing. I feel like we come in our own way. I feel like that's the one thing I tell everybody. if you work in this tech wild business, you should also be experiencing it from all sides.
Yeah.
And if you can and you have the opportunity, what stops you? You know, one of the conversations I always have with people is, how did you do this? How did you run a boutique hotel? You can do it.
Yeah.
And fascinatingly, that is the 2-3 things people hone in, and they're not interested in anything else, because everyone is secretly wanting to do it, but has not done it for whatever reasons, right? So I think you have to make space. But that, going back to all of these experiences, is about looking at it from a different perspective. So that was a very fascinating role. I got to work with some phenomenal people, you know, not coming from compliance, but sat in compliance, and as a partner with compliance to think about what are the problems we can solve for, and how does, you know, the business partner with fintechs to deliver these smart solutions, was amazing. You know, it was just a very different world. How do you partner with Swift to do some interesting projects? You know, we did some of our first proof of value using machine learning, using a company called Silent 8. We also looked at doing distributed ledger work to make sure that information within the correspondent banking chain is...
What year was this at this point?
This was 2016 to 2018.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this was kind of when the banks were starting to do the consortiums and things along those lines. Okay.
That's right. That was one of the main sort of drivers, and sort of thinking about things differently. It was a wild role. I don't think I had ever met anybody as a counterpart in any other bank doing it.
Yeah.
I think Stanchart was leading the way from a fines perspective, and then sort of really turning it around by having new tech and thinking about things differently. So it was an incredible role. It also sort of gave you a different perspective of, you know, reg tech and what compliance and risk from the inside. Also very humbling.
Yeah. Well, that's so one of the things about this is the steepness of your learning curve in every single thing that you've done. Well, one thing I want to say about the previous thing is it sounds like your ability, I mean, you're a confident woman. I know that. But it seems like I say that because of what I'm going to say next. It seems like your ability to keep your ego in check and to the word disrupt is similar to innovation, completely overused, but disrupt yourself, right? Like the idea that you're even willing to, based on the career that you had, go drive Uber for 6 months and then end up at Standard.
6 months.
6 weeks, sorry. Sorry. 6 days is still
it was
wild
hard.
considering your background.
Hard, yes.
That is the humanity of that and the way that actually grounds you, I would imagine it keeps you at that level of humility that allows you to ask those questions. Because the role at Standard Chartered, I'm sure it was
wild.
New.
Yes, and it was senior and it was wild. But again, I think a lot of it goes back to my parents, right? Being brought up as an armed forces child, and you go into the experiences you have is also wild. And, you know, being brought up to the fact that, you know, you should be able to dine with, you know, your father's squadron and then in the silverware and whatever else is needed, and then you should be able to go home and, you know, make your own bed, right? So you lived that paradox every day.
Right.
So it was not something which was like, you know, when you don't go in you cycle to the mess because you can then have time to get back home.
Right.
And you did all of that. And you know, you don't realize how that conditions you as a human being, and your ability to do that and then do whatever else, that flex, I think, is another superpower. Because that goes back to confidence, right?
Totally.
You go back to how do you connect with people at different levels is such an important thing as an entrepreneur now. And I think everything that I've done is because you're constantly dealing with egos and people, and everyone's fragile, and you just don't know what you've said. And, but you need to read the room, plus you need to know how to work with different kinds of people. I think that really, I don't think I would have been able to do this if I didn't have that backdrop, you know? So, and also recognizing it, right? Because I didn't go to a famous B school. I went to school in India. I did my master's in India. and then I do whatever I do, wherever I do it.
Yeah.
It doesn't stop you,
Right.
But I think knowing that and maybe being also a bit fearless, I think is another part that I feel maybe it's a good thing or a bad thing. But just saying, okay, worst is it won't work out. And then you can say, okay, I tried it and move on.
Yeah.
Right? So, but yes, I think just having that humility, I think, is very, very crucial.
I think the entrepreneurial spirit of knowing you can fail and then come back from it is something that is, I have wanted to start a company my whole life. I still have not. I think it's probably because I've been so close to founders my whole life. Like I think I met like my first mentor that was a CEO, I think I was 17. And then from there I've just been so close and I'm like, that just seems, I have to really believe before I'm gonna do that.
Sure.
And I just haven't had the thing that I believe in yet. But
that's right. And that's an important thing, I think, recognizing that you feel for it passionately and you want to solve for it, because it comes with its massive challenges. And the rate of success versus failure is humongous. And people, and also the journey as a female entrepreneur is another thing. It is very, very lopsided. It is not the way it is painted. And you see a lot of women stepping in and stepping out. If you don't have a good ecosystem to support, I feel things are better. But when I started 5-6 years ago, it was hard.
Yeah.
And doing a consulting business. So Denim sort of came about.
Yeah, explain Denim.
Yeah. So one, I can wear denim. That was one of the main things. I called it Denim. Like, I can be on point. More because denim for me is a great symbolization of you can wear denim in a boardroom and you can wear denim when you're working in a farm. I love the flexibility of how that gets used, and which also is something, it talks to my value in terms of being a fair playing ground for people. And I just thought, what a great way of looking at things in a different way, and hence I called it Denim. And maybe a little bit of antithesis where banks were not very very crazy about people wearing denim at that time. It was not cool.
Right.
So it was a little bit of antithesis of that, but primarily the flex of denim is okay at any point. So that was an important thing. And the more solutions and the partnerships I was doing with different organizations, that was a key thing.
And as the culture's changed, I think the desire for denim inside of a boardroom of a multi-trillion-dollar bank, well, maybe not literally in the boardroom, but it's there. Yeah. It's shifted in a very interesting way.
It's massively shifted. But it's also interesting that if tomorrow I want to start a denim business, it doesn't stop me. I have more people, a lot of people reach out to me to say, are you a wholesaler for denim? I could be.
Can I get some Levi's?
Like I could be. So it's really interesting how, the play of words lands up, you can use it to your benefit. And I think denim was going back to something you said, the bit of work that I landed, my sort of last corporate role, drove me to think about what do I want to do differently. I was an entrepreneur in residence anyway, and it was something I wanted to tick off from that list again, and that's where, and it also happened all accidentally. Swift was one of my first clients. I had done a lot of work with them. And then it just started. And my process has also been very immersive. I work with different fintechs, regtech companies, and I am part of their team. It becomes immersive, and I think that's where the value gets added. Because for me, it's you should be able to eat your own dog food. So strategy cannot be independent of execution.
Right.
And that is what for me has been probably the big lesson learned.
That also probably limits the number of clients you can take on at one time.
That's right. And and also you really work with digital nomads, you work with partners, people you've worked before, you assemble teams for different programs and projects, which has also been very fascinating. I've been an advisor to Bain. I've had a lot of interesting things I ended up doing. And you pick and choose. It's a different journey. It's also hard. The peaks and troughs are different.
Yeah, of course.
But you get to do a lot of different things, and your ability to then influence how and sadly, or the reality is that banks are still the largest consumer of service.
Of course.
And the fintechs and the regtechs as much as they don't want to, they are the biggest consumers. So somebody like me can then drive that conversation and those partnerships differently, because I've seen it from the buy side and the sell side, and that advisory drives it. But it has its own limitations, right? Because you can only then do that much amount of work at any given point. And that's been the exciting part. But it's sort of full circle, but things don't change.
But they do. But they don't.
But they don't.
Do. Yeah.
It's that interesting thing where, if I look at what is exciting me now within what's happening, you see the resurgence of embedded finance coming back. Banking as a service, which all sort of collapsed, went away. People were not believing in. I think is going to be the next big thing.
Yeah.
Crypto. Look at stablecoins.
Exactly.
I mean that. Yeah. We will not go there, but you know exactly what I mean.
I do, but I also kind of want to go there a little bit because of your previous role. So the Standard Chartered thing, I think, is fascinating in the so my career in finance basically was I did an internship in college in an investment bank. I got very, very angry about the fact that you could in 1 second wear a fiduciary hat, take it off, put on a broker-dealer hat, and then I could, I can just kind of sell you whatever I want to sell you. And then started working in banking, realized that the reason, started there, then ended up at a robo-advisor.
Wow.
401k robo-advisor or pension or whatever your term is wherever you are. And was just so confused why no one was saving for retirement. And then moved into banking, and I'm like, oh, that's right. Well, it's because no one has any savings. And then I moved into a banking as a service company, and somehow just being in Silicon Valley in that world, I realized, oh, it's because most of the world's in debt. And you just kind of go through these different things. And one of the things I wish I would have actually done earlier, and maybe still will do, is go work for a regulator. Because I wonder, one of the things I think is interesting about your background is, it seems like you've influenced a lot of change in the industry, a lot of change that people may never know that you had your handprints on. But a lot of it does touch what we, as an industry, I think it's shifting, but have classically looked at as unsexy, boring, compliance, regulatory stuff. It's now the most important thing. It's now everything that matters, and especially as political dynamics change around the world. I mean, that competitive advantage and ability to understand that piece feels like another superpower.
Yeah, and look, I think it's a very, and maybe I love simplifying things, but when you do sales, no contract, no business. You may have the most fantastic pipeline, but if I cannot close a deal, I'm not successful.
Right.
It's very 1 or 0, right? So which means that you have to know that I may close the business, but if my legal team and my contract is not going to get the sign-off I need, I have lost the deal, right? So when you understand that, your ability to say, listen, I need to start reviewing the terms while we do the financials. I knew this earlier on in my life, and I knew that if I had to get ahead, I actually like compliance and legal people. And probably is and I may be having a contrarian view to a lot of people. They are not bad. It's just that you need to know how to engage them and also make them part of your journey. So, sitting with them and saying, I want to structure this deal. What do you think is the risk? How do I cover that? What's the buffer? What can you do differently? The lawyers were, for everything that I have done, they have been my biggest supporters, structuring, negotiating, working with partners. So once you understand that, I think success is easy. And going back to the fact that you respect people for what they do, you engage them in advance. It's common sense. You call a legal risk and compliance person at the end of the journey.
Not going to go well.
But you're going to waste time because you've not accounted for what needed to be baked in, what the challenges are, and where the issues are. They are there to make it successful for all parties. So if you understand that, I think success happens. There's bad actors everywhere. I'm not saying every legal and compliance person and risk person is like,
some of them legitimately they just view their job as to say no.
Correct. But that is in every aspect of the business, right? So I think once you understand that, and your ability to engage people at that level with that respect and humility plays a long way. The same ways with the regulators. I think we're very lucky that MAS is forward-looking. They're always interested in collaborating. I mean, the thing that they're doing about Project Nexus. India is always very impressive with UPI and the infrastructure that we want to build. I think for me, sort of cross-border payments is super exciting. That new way of working in terms of having that platform and collaboration is super key. There are still a lot of opportunities to optimize that. AI, I mean, everybody's talking about it, but for me, it's also the generative AI where a lot of your regular activities get simplified. Right? As an entrepreneur, you all need that support, right? Sort of recognizing that there's a lot of good things that you can work with, and getting it more over the line is more exciting, but also sort of looking at the pace of where stablecoins, where Project Nexus is, where you're simplifying the connection of, sending money from Singapore to India is amazing, to Thailand, to Indonesia, to Malaysia. It's all happening so quickly now, and that same infrastructure for the SME as well as the corporate side is, I think, super exciting. I feel like a lot of the change and a lot of new ways of working has really, the consumer side of the business has really transformed. The pace of that coming into the corporate world is where I'm putting my money, the little money I have. Or not, but you know what I mean? I think there's a lot of interesting things to be watched. It's just giving access to what your clients can do in that infrastructure. You've already got them on board, and just creating efficiencies. But also thinking about how can you build in things from improving operations and efficiency, right? Because money is one part of it, but there are so many things that happened before.
Right.
Is something now bringing all of that together, I think, is become programmability is a buzzword that everybody talks about now. It's really about that. What can I do more for you in terms of you have to pay invoices? Can I do reconciliation?
Right.
Can I do this? A lot of things that go up to you actually paying on behalf of a bank. Or a client, is all of that becomes exciting. So I think there's a number of things in that sort of world, but I feel cross-border still there's a huge business there. I think SME, interestingly, just read the headline where JP Morgan is...
the Klarna thing?
Yeah. So again, resurgence of that.
That was today or yesterday?
Just this,
that was today?
I saw it this morning, maybe it was last night.
I think it was overnight. I don't know. At this point, I'm not sure what time zone I'm on, so it was sometime within the last 48 hours.
And for me, that's a use case I called out for SMEs, right? Because if I'm able to give an SME that option for them to then lead their business with that sort of credit facility, it's a game changer.
And again, unsexy. Cash management is not that's
very unsexy, but very sexy.
The sexiest parts of our business are the most unsexy parts of our business, in my opinion. And it's and that's why, again, I don't know if I'll ever go work in a regulatory agency, but I've finally gotten to this point where, retirement, and the Maslow's hierarchy of financial needs. I'm fully convinced that policy, regulation, and just understanding it is one thing, but being able to influence it and having a voice in that is what matters more than anything else.
Yeah, and also, getting the regulators to also look at using the new tech for their own efficiencies, right? I think it's, again, you got to eat your own dog food.
Yeah.
You regulate something, are you then also using some of that your own way? I feel like is something that you need to constantly, but the non-sexy parts of the businesses make money. That's the way the reality is. And the volumes of cross-border is another level, right? So I think I'm excited about all of these things. I feel like, the SME side of using buy now, pay later is another great opportunity for things to move forward. I think just having access to different payment methods and digital assets is going to be an interesting thing. And what is really the use case? I don't really know from on the consumer side, but definitely on the corporate side, I think just giving them an access for speed, right, is what you need. And that's been the biggest grouse, I think, for a lot of our clients in the business. But I think, that really is something I'm excited to see how that evolves. Yeah.
On the consumer side, to me, it almost feels like a lot of the innovation is going to be invisible, right? Like there's things are just going to
I think payments in general has to be invisible. It has to be part of your. It's I always say you have to explain it to people. It's tap water now, right?
It's a good way to put it.
You know what I mean? It's just it has to be so seamless that it's you don't even think about it now. But I think there's still, again, it goes back to, I still think there is a lot of gaps. Just customer experience. I don't think there is. It's again driven from a bank. I think you have the Revoluts and the Vises of the world who simplify all of it, the super apps to a certain degree. But I think principally you want to use an app that solves problems in the easiest way. I love Apple Pay. It's easy. I know I have Apple Pay. I don't have to keep registering myself.
Yep.
I'm not plugging for Apple Pay, but I'm just saying convenience.
There's no one. There's 5 of us in this room,
Correct.
and if one of us hasn't used it in the past 7 days, I'd be shocked.
To me, that's another convenience, right? So, and if you think about it, a lot of non-banking players, why are they entering? Purely because of that. I mean, Mercedes-Benz has a bank.
Yep. Mercedes Pay is fascinating.
It is. But again, they have entrenched themselves from a lifestyle perspective. You get a card, you are paying the points towards the next purchase.
It's the next Amex Black or Plat or
whatever that is. But that's the way, for me, that is a great use case of how people need to sort of go through the journey and you're plugged in, right? And I think the more you do, I still feel that there is space for really common sense things in terms of customer engagement. I don't feel that there's enough out there, because trust is still with the large banks. I might sweep my salary into another app, which is easier because of the functionality. But if the bank apps,
the direct deposit's going to Deutsche though, or going to wherever. It's not going to maybe it's going to Chime or something like that based
eventually,
on the 2
but
day.
the first stop will always be the bank. So if the banks are smart about how their functionality increases, a lot of things can happen.
Yeah.
And to me, the role of banks will also evolve quite a bit, because you've got that massive infrastructure. You then, for me, one of the things would be you provide compliance as a service to all of that. So, I mean, to me, the superpower, the other power is, I call myself a fintegrator, because I feel like it's the master collaborator in terms of bringing fintech, regtechs with how do you work with a bank to get this done, right? And I enjoy that, because I see both sides of it.
And you get to bring people together, talk to them, have some fun.
And also, you're solving for something, which at the end of the day, there's impact. Your money is to be made, things need to happen. And you also see that, this is an interesting thing that could change. So I do feel that will continue to evolve, that part of that partnership of solutions coming together, banks getting better to partner with these firms will improve. I think. And it's interesting, like 2 years ago, I know so many banking as a service partners, wallet providers, super apps started to fold up because the business now it's all coming back. That's just, cycle of life.
Yeah, well, the innovation cycle, but the innovation cycle for us is so different because of the regulation, right? Like it's just not like any other industry.
Yeah.
So you used the term fintegrator, and I, as I told you before we started, I didn't know what I was going to ask you, but thinking about your career, you've dived deep on a number of different, very fascinating areas, and
thank you.
I would think that there's a significant level of expertise in different areas, but at the same time, as we discussed before, you can't know everything.
Yes.
I'm curious, this term expert always fascinates me, right? And how, if one considers themselves an expert or not, how much, is there one specific area where you feel like you're an expert, or or is it more a matter of, I know enough to be able to bring the right people together in order to do the thing? And because I struggle with this, right? I'm expected to be a fintech expert at work, and I'm, I know stuff, I read stuff, I talk to people, I've been in the industry for over a decade, but it's the craziest industry on earth, and it is impossible to know everything. So.
And I think if somebody is saying that they do, there is
a
problem. There is a small problem. I think for me, what I always rely on, my ability to see the front to back, my ability to see what the business is trying to achieve, because I've had a wide spectrum of things that I've got involved in, which makes me which gives me the ability to deep dive as I need. Right. So do I understand the consumer business? Yes. Set up a bunch of retail banks. Do I understand the transaction banking, cross-correspondent banking, the cash management business? Yes, because I've worked in those spaces. But I've not needed to be running that business, so I can't say but I have enough information and enough expertise of running and collaborating with them to deliver that. So I think it's really choosing the lane where you want to go next and what you want to deliver. But none of it is irrelevant, right? Because everything touches.
Everything is relevant, yeah.
And so the compliance piece is so relevant. The risk piece is so relevant. Your ability to sell these products become relevant. So I think I'm in a very unique space of being a conduit as I need. So it's almost like I wear a different hat depending on whom I'm talking to. And I think there's probably not a lot of people in that space, because you then go from a generalist to a specialist depending on what you need to dive into. But you also need somebody who can see it all to orchestrate that, if that makes sense. So I think it really depends on the need of the hour. Then you deep dive and you get into what you need to do and what needs to happen. And also, you ask people to say, okay, I've done this, but I feel logically this makes sense. Does that make sense? There's enough specialists that you can rely on. And I think that's why, for me, the word fintegrator is what I see myself as, the ability to partner, collaborate, ask people, bring in the right people for that specific problem where they have the next level of understanding. But I think the main thing is solving a problem. Right? Focusing on what are we trying to solve for? What is the value? How can we make impact? And also prioritizing, because you only have that much money and time. So and those things sometimes go in the background. You need to be able to also bring that together to deliver an impact. So I don't know if I've answered the question, but I feel like it's not a straightforward binary answer to it. Right? It's always situational. It depends on what you're trying to do and how you're trying to solve for. And different skills come in at different times. Because when you land up doing a lot of greenfield and new build, all hands on deck. So I've been lucky in that sense.
You mentioned solving a problem. And now you're running Denim. You have banks coming to you with problems. I wonder how much you're dealing with the inverse of a technology chasing a problem. Like, I would imagine more than one bank has come to you and said, hey, we want to do something with AI, we don't know what. How do you handle those conversations?
So I think, what is also very interesting is that my colleagues on the banking side, and I'm not saying everybody, but there's a lot of, and I think it's the same on the fintech side. I think it's a general thing, going back to what we just talked about. Not knowing everything is okay, right? And a number of times the conversations you have with senior leaders, they want to do this, but they don't know what that really means. And the conversation becomes a lot of education around what's happening in the market, who's doing what. And it's okay to do that, right? And I think, but it's different ways how people reach you because of not wanting to say it that way. But I think it's really sort of guiding them to say, hey, let's look at the problems you're looking to solve. Oh, everybody's talking about blockchain, but does that fit what you need? Let's look at the technology part secondary, but let's look at what are we trying to achieve. So I think it's that sort of guidance in terms of what are we trying to solve for? Let's keep it front and center. Is there a use case? Do you have money for it? Then we look at what is available in the market. The same happens on the fintech side. You have all these really amazing tech people who know how to build, but they don't know what they're building for. But also not being able to have that conversation, right, is something where people like myself come in, where I'm saying, okay, if you cannot speak the language of the person running that business, we can't even walk or jump before whatever we want to do. You can't get into the technicalities, but you can talk about the functionality that your service will offer to solve that problem. People want to get solutions for problems. Everybody has a target to achieve. Everybody needs to deliver something. So that ability to have a reverse conversation and then bringing them along is pivotal.
You probably advise yourself out of the occasional role as well, though.
Absolutely.
I would imagine.
100%, especially with the large consulting firms who are not willing to wanting a quick fix. Right? Because that's their bread and butter.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, 100%. And you go in and you're like, oh my God, I know 2 companies who can solve that for you.
Right.
But they're like, but that's too quick.
Right. Yeah. We need billable hours. We need this to take at least a year, if not longer. Yeah.
Absolutely. But so you're part of that sort of problem solving, but you are also, you're sort of quickly exiting that conversation, which is good, right? Because you also don't waste your time.
Yeah.
And also I think sort of ability to understand who has the money, who can engage you. You learn a lot of different things, right? From being an entrepreneur, because you got to be very smart about that. And you also do things, you have friends in the business, they want help. But then you have to stop at some point saying, okay, I can only do this, but this is what I do for a living.
Right, yeah. I can't do everything pro bono.
For free. Yeah. So it's an interesting mix. I think you have all kinds. And also I think there is a bit of a taboo on consulting. For whatever reason, people think, oh my God, consulting means a lot of money. There's a lot of value. You're getting people with so much experience to take you from zero to hero very quickly, right? But so also engaging with people who appreciate that.
Because there's also very different types of consulting, as we just alluded to.
That's right.
Like sitting here with you having this conversation is quite, and also having an individual consultant at a specific time in a business to solve a very specific problem is different. And my love to Deloitte, my love to Accenture, my love to, there's incredibly smart people at all of them, and I love a lot of them, but those are different things.
They are very different things. And and there is a place for everything, right? You need a building block, you need that ecosystem for different things to come in. Also, every engagement is a risk mitigator for a business. So if you're not able to justify why you're bringing certain people in, it's a problem, right? Because you are spending somebody else's money and you need to be able to cover that. So, one understands that, and I think that consortium or going in, partnering with different people, how do you represent a solution for a client, making those connections, also becomes a key part. Also, sort of on the investor side, I've done some work for investors who are looking to invest in some of the firms. They want you to do a due diligence, give them a point of view, because the point of view is very different to somebody else who's just purely doing an investment, the cap table and these crunching this number, but not really looking at the product.
An income statement is very different than understanding the entire
what really the
landscape.
Business is doing, right? So it's been a very fascinating. I really enjoy all elements of it, but you also learn through all of those things. Everyone brings something interesting to it if you're open to it. The investment side is a very new space for me. I'd never worked in. I have done some work, but very different. I didn't need to get into it the way I've been doing that advisory. So I think it's been fascinating. It's been so interesting to, and then you also want to help people who really want to make a difference, right? So you get so involved in trying to help them make it a success. I think that ability, but that boundary thing, I think, is probably a key theme that I continue to manage. That, at the end of the day, it's not my monkey, it's not my circus. I live by that.
Yeah, you sleep well at night.
Yes, you want to, right? Because you have to, there's a reason why you do what you do. You jump in, you sort out, but you have to, then finally you've advised them with 3 options, but it's their business to make that decision as to what works for them. You can give them the pros and cons. So that's also been a very interesting experience to sort of then, jump off the bus and watch to say, okay, let's see what decisions you make.
Yeah.
So you get very invested, but you also have to make sure you don't, you look after yourself.
Yeah.
So I think it's been a fascinating ride. Would I do it differently? No. I think it's been a very fun ride. And get to meet lots of interesting people, when we met and, now we're here. So, I think there's so much common than there is uncommon. I feel like that's a big part of it.
I feel like the ability to, one, make your own decisions in terms of the clients you take on is beautiful, but based on your background and the way the world is moving, your ability to maybe balance your portfolio of work in a direction of, this is going to be a cash cow, this is going to be good for the this is actually going to make a difference in the world, and
making choices, right? At the end of it, you want to do, it's that lethal combination. Oh, the client has money, they can spend and they have a big problem to solve. Great, right? And then you have people who they contact you who don't have the money, who have a great problem, they're looking for money. So it's that managing that portfolio of how do you also keep the lights on and how do you balance that is I think, question that you have to always grapple with and
That's the fun part.
Yeah. And you can work from anywhere. Parents are in India, so I try and go back every few months to spend some time with them. That's the beautiful part.
Yeah.
I am connected wherever I need.
Yeah.
So I love the flexibility.
Yeah.
I love the fact that you're able to choose clients that you want to work in. You want to just do some pro bono work. You want to try and figure out what's happening, who's doing different things. Yeah, I think that's been really fascinating.
As you're advising, I guess I'm kind of curious on both sides. As you're advising startups and banks, or both, is there anything that you find yourself consistently saying in meetings? Like this is one thing that I always end up saying to them.
That is a very, very good question. Yes. Two things. One is that there is a very myopic view of the business that you belong to. Someone like me sees it across the board. Every large bank as a client wants to do what the experience on the consumer side is what you want to bring on the corporate side. And it's so interesting that there is constant demarcation to say, oh, but that's for retail. Oh, that's for corporate. Actually, those lines blur a lot and you can actually benefit. That is a consistent thing. And also, compliance will not approve. Risk committees will not approve. Oh, my ears can bleed. How many times I've heard that? And I'm like, have we tried to talk to them? Have we tried to explain
Have you
to
brought them in, made them feel like part of the conversation?
It is the same thing. And then you get on to calls with their legal compliance risk and they're like, they didn't explain it like this.
Right.
So it's really that part where, but again, I think it goes back to culture, right? Everybody talks about, compliance first and customer first. What are people doing to build that skill set? That cultural change of why this is important, right? People teach their kids to brush their teeth. Why?
Yeah.
It goes back to as basic as that.
Right.
And again, I think I would say these two themes continually come up. Also, people don't talk to each other. So as an independent person, you're like, have you talked to so-and-so? He does exactly what you're doing on the other side. I think if you team up, you'll have a bigger case. So that connector part is sacrosanct to me. I'm always connecting people.
The humanity is at the center of it through all of it.
It really is, and I love it because because you're seeing, you're literally watching a film where you see all of these actors, and I'm like, if you guys only have a chat with each other, it'll help me, it'll help you, we'll get a better use case. You could go jointly to your approval committees, they will get excited to say, this is what we're trying to do. Your buying power improves, these guys get a bigger deal. Lots of good things can happen. Fascinating that people don't talk to each other.
Incentives drive the world in a fascinating way, I find. And one of the, we won't name names, but one of the interesting parts in working in the content sphere, which, running the US show, big banks have, as you are very aware, different teams. Those different teams hold different budgets, different marketing budgets. And as a editorial programmer for, the largest and most important, especially in the US, fintech show, we're maybe having a conversation with the comms team on the payment side, but we would love to have the COO, right? But their incentive set is actually such that if the COO goes, they're upset.
Yes.
And I get it in terms of incentives, I get it in terms of corporate structure, but then to your point, you take a step back and you're like, these companies could be so much more, it's cultural, and if they were to some degree find a way to break these barriers and look at it on a global level and drive it forward and get out of their own way, the world would just all look so different.
Yeah, but the insecurities that drive people of holding on, right? It's constantly, I want to own my own little tower. Why?
Ego.
Ego, and also, I think keeping yourself relevant, but you're making yourself irrelevant by doing that. So I think it's really, but I think it goes back to the culture within an organization where you encourage that. You encourage people to say, actually, the more you cross-pollinate, the better it is going to be, right? Better butterflies come. So how do you, so that is a thing that I am constantly grappling with. People say that they've told a stakeholder this, and invariably they don't know.
Right.
And then, okay, then can I now get in and talk to them and explain to them and bring them on board? So you have to do a lot of those things in the background to try and get something off the ground, just helping them, because a new service is a new service for all, right? And what you need to give people is an oxygen mask to say, it's not going to fail, it's going to get better. And that insecurity that things will fail is such a thing that people grapple with. Maybe people like you and I don't.
Yeah.
But to
no, I know what you mean. Yeah,
the appetite of saying, and I
don't
think
know.
Deutsche probably was a great training ground for me, where, you know, as an investment bank, if things don't work, you course correct. You agree, you come back in your steering column and say, okay, it didn't work out, this is not going to work, can we all agree, and this is the next plan of action. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so things will fail. You know, the percentage of failure is higher than success. Knowing that, but reusing things that you built for something else is always good. So it's really finally about mindset. It's really all about mindset and how you want to look at things, yeah.
I could not agree more. I just got the time nod from over in the corner. So
that's right.
I think my last question to you is, if you had a billboard that you could, like, if we just had all the financial services, the banks, fintech, I mean, we just gave you a free billboard up at Money 2020. God. What would you put on it? What would be the ethos that you would put out there?
I think human connection.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, just very simple. Just the human connection, I think, for me, is sort of the bedrock of everything I do.
I love that.
Yeah, nothing fancy, but just that.
Well, it's missing, so it's fancy.
Yes. Oh, well, I hope not. I feel like the people I come in contact with and connect with is what I want, I bring.
There could be more of it. Maybe is how I should have phrased it. Yeah.
We could all do a little bit more along those lines. Yeah. I think, not taking yourselves too seriously, not coming in your way.
Yeah.
Really, I think those would be the other elements. But I think the human connection for me is the middle of all of it.
Thank you, Namita.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely.
It was really lovely.
This has been so fun.
It has been.
Yeah.
We must do it again.
We absolutely will do it again. We'll have to check in. I mean, enough is shifting in the world politically and financially and everything else that we'll do a check-in. We'll do a check-in and see how things are going.
We will. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. All right.